Design Leader Insights is brought to you by Fuego UX. Fuego UX is a leading UX research, strategy, and design consultancy. Hey, Zach, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, of course. And to get started, I'd love to learn a little bit about your journey in UX.
I was lucky enough to grow up in a household. My dad was a professional photographer. My mom was a partner in a design firm. And so I kind of always grew up around it. And so I was determined not to actually be a designer or to do anything in design. It was only through some classes that I ended up taking in college, which actually had nothing to do with design. They were actually international environmental law, but they had us build web pages. And it was at a time when like no one even knew what a web page was. We walked in the first day of class and they said, we want you to, there's going to be no papers and no tests. You're going to get email addresses and build web pages. And everybody looked around like, what the hell is that? But I remember the first time I built that, my first index.html page. And I immediately knew like, this is the future. And so like, I'd always been around design. I'd always been really passionate about it. I just didn't think there was a pathway to actually like a true profession. Like you could actually make it a decent living at it. But as soon as I got hit by the bug, I was like, I'm all in. And then, so I think that was my first path. And then I was lucky enough to get in on, early web design and branding. And then I moved into mobile. And I think I got early enough into mobile that was actually the springboard that got me into Uber. So I don't think I could have gotten the Uber job if I didn't have, 3+ years, early days of mobile, building lots of applications. And I always believe in getting your hands really dirty. Like that's the best way to learn. And so I got a ton of experience there and then got to Uber and my career, I've been lucky enough like to get into Uber and work with some incredible people. And my career has kind of taken the path of just the same thing of just getting to the right place, right time. And especially it's so critical being around great leaders that you can also learn from.
Yeah.
So I attribute a lot of that to, the success I've had on my journey.
That's awesome. And now you're at Snowflake, which is definitely not mobile first, but kind of a different product, different area. One of the things that I thought was fascinating at Uber that you were telling me is they actually had you be a driver, right? Like that's how much they wanted you to feel that user experience and understand it. Tell me about that.
Well, I think, look, it's very hard to build a product if you don't have user empathy. Very early on, when I got to Uber, everybody got $400 credit to be a rider. Eventually, when we added Eats, you got to use Eats. So we were all immersed in the product on a daily basis. I was on the driver side. So how do you create for drivers, especially the app we were building? That was used everywhere. It's the same app in India as it was in San Francisco, as it was in Egypt, as it was in London, and many, many cities, right? And so I think it was at the time, it was like 70 countries. So you can just imagine the diversity that you have to, and you're operating in these, you don't know the environment people are operating in. You've got a digital experience that has big ramifications in the physical world, depending on what you do and what decisions you've made. So it's very hard as a designer to sit in a seat and just designing for a screen, and you don't have the context, right? So the thing that we had on the driver's side is everybody went out and drove. We actually, at one point, we had I think it was 9 cars down in the basement, and everybody was going and you could sign up to drive. And there's nothing that builds a greater level of empathy than actually putting yourself literally in the driver's seat. Yeah. And it changes everything about how you approach the design. So I really think that's an important thing, is you always have to be able to put yourself in the customer's, the user's shoes to get to the best solution.
Yeah, no, I love that. And then I'm wondering how you do that, or how you encourage your team to do that at Snowflake, which is like a complex B2B SaaS product. Maybe explain a little bit about what Snowflake does for the people that might not know.
Certainly this is the most challenging one, because I think it's hard to get close to the users or put yourself in the user's shoes, because it is a different type of discipline. And so just for people who don't know, Snowflake is traditionally a data warehousing platform, but we're building a whole set of tools around how we democratize data, making data more accessible, how you share data across organizations, how you can build apps, native apps that actually run on Snowflake or within the Snowflake bounds. And there's just a ton of it. We're also building AI and machine learning tools that help you pull in your data and really make it more efficient. So how you set up your own data and derive insights from it. We have, first off, we have some really good onboarding process. I took a 4-day Snowflake course live, in-person course. I've taken SQL classes. I just have tried to immerse myself, but that's just not enough, I think. And one of the things I'm trying to do here with this team, and I think we're still in the early days, is I want all designers to get closer. I want us all to feel, going back to like that Uber example, I want us all to feel like what it is to be a real user. And I think you have to do that. It's not enough just to poke around with the product itself and say, oh, I kind of know, like I can run a script here. But you actually, I think the best way to learn is always by having a project or something you want to actually complete. And so one of the things that we've started introducing here within the design team, it's actually part of our design, one of our design OKRs, is how do we get us all closer to Snowflake? And so we, on a weekly basis now, we're having different design leaders or just different, I guess, leaders in general come to the design team, have us, hey, I want you to try doing this thing. I want you to try setting this up. And we'll take half an hour and we'll try doing it. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But it's really good to build empathy for like, wow, that was really hard, or that made no sense. And that's actually how you start to push the bounds on how people start to think about, how do I make this product better? Because now I've actually experienced it. I'm not just trying to run this thing or it's a happy path example of how it all works, but I really come up against like the real friction in the product, and how do I start to reduce that in a meaningful way? So those are some of the ways that I think we're trying to bring people closer as a program, but it takes time, and it is a complex technical product.
Zach, you mentioned like having great leaders along the way in your journey. What are some key things you learned from those inspiring leaders?
I think understanding that they don't have all the answers, and that leadership is oftentimes lonely, and sometimes you have to make hard choices, sometimes without all the information, but you still have to make choices. Leading with empathy and honesty, and really, how do you take care of your people? Because at the end of the day, I support design. That's really the way I think about it, is I am supporting my team. I'm supporting the discipline and the process and how we get great product into the world. And so really having that supporting mindset is really important, because that's actually how you build great teams, and making sure that people feel cared for, that you've seen, like, how does it look when people feel safe in an environment and they can actually speak their minds.
Zach, how about we wrap up with advice you have for new designers that might be entering the field today?
Yeah, so much, so many thoughts. I think the first is get really good at your craft. I think it's incredibly important to just get great, and put yourself in a place where you're able to learn from other people, and being humble about that. It takes a long time to get really good at something before you try to jump into the next thing. Or, I've had designers that have only been doing it for a year and a half, and they've come to me and they're saying, well, I'm thinking maybe I should go into management. And my advice is that, like, spend the next 5 to 10 years getting great at what you do. Because if you get great at what you do, you can apply it to anything. Yeah. And also be in pursuit of the journey and just trying to get better. That learning mindset, you can kind of go anywhere. You just don't know where it's going to take you. But I think that's one of the things that served me incredibly well, is just putting myself in a place where I can learn. When you think about the craft, it's well beyond the UI and the pixels. Being able to tell a narrative, storytelling, that is one, I think, the superpowers of what design can do and should be doing. And so being able to, because that's how you bring people along, right? You can't just showing a screen isn't going to do it, but tell me why, tell me the story. How did I get there? Being able to tell me, I worked in consulting for a big portion of my early career, and I learned how to pitch. And I think pitching is a really important skill that not enough designers have learned. I think the only other piece I would add is put yourself, especially early on in your career, take a ton of risk. If there's one thing I look back and wish I'd done more of, is just swing for the fences more. The worst thing that could have happened is I had to go home and live on my parents' couch for 6 months as I got back on my feet. But, that's the thing, is those are where you have the opportunities to learn the most. So don't be afraid. Don't worry about the what ifs, and just like go do it and put yourself in those spots, because you just never know how they're going to turn out.
Yeah, love that. Go big for sure. Zach, thank you so much for joining the series today. Definitely enjoyed this chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. It was a lot of fun.